Hi everyone. So today we're going to follow up with what we talked about last time, which was an introduction to key signatures and scales, particularly the major scale. So let's do some review. We learned about pitch and how to organize pitch in a systematic way with a pattern of half steps and whole steps into scales, which have certain qualities. They start and end on the same note. They are the same accidentals in every single register. They use every letter of our musical alphabet once. So let's do a little bit of review. So how this will work for these videos is I'll go ahead and give a moment here where you can pause your video. You could try out the things that we see on the screen, and then I can reveal the answers and talk through them. So go ahead and pause your video now, and I'll show the answer here in just a moment. So if we start on E flat and we were to build our scale, we'd build it all the way up. So for instance, between E flat and F, we have a whole step, another whole step here between F and G, half step between G and A flat, whole step between A flat and B flat, whole step between B flat and C, another whole step, and then finally a half step. We use every letter of our musical alphabet. We have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. We don't mix accidentals. We only have flats involved. There's no mixing of sharps and flats. We start and end on the same note, and we have that pattern of whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half intact here. So given the scale we've just written, what are the scale degrees for this passage? So remember that scale degrees are assigning numbers 1 through 7 to the unique notes of our scale, which allows us to look at actual pieces of music. So this example here is pretty straightforward, but assuming that we're in the key of E flat major for this passage here, we have the E flat scale here. This shouldn't take too much time, but go ahead and pause your video and assign scale degrees here. So if we were to look at these, we'd see that we start on scale degree 1. We leap upwards to scale degree 6 over here, which is C, down to 5, skip down to 3, 2, and then 1. So it looks something kind of like that. Again, it's kind of scalar. It looks almost like a descending scale, but we have some skips here, and we leap upwards. So that's kind of a one of the applications of scale degrees is being able to look at how the notes of a melody or of a piece of music intersect with the scales that we can identify. So before we get into the main topic of today's talk, which is all about key signatures, which are a kind of form of shorthand that relate to our major scales, let's talk first about enharmonic scales. So there are 12 unique pitches on a keyboard, and any of them can be the basis of a major scale. However, for scales that begin on black keys, some of these aren't in use. Now, we have 12 unique pitches, and we have 5 black keys. So you might be inclined to think, okay, well, we have 12 keys, and then maybe 5 of them have 2 names. So we have an additional, say, 17 or whatever, or like total 17 or something like that. But we don't use all of these because there are certain scales where if we begin on them, they require double sharps or double flats to get the patterns that we need. So for instance, A flat major is in very frequent use. We can see A flat, B flat, C, D flat, E flat, F, G, and then A flat again. We have some notes that are natural, some notes are flat, pretty easy to look at. Now, the same note on the keyboard is also called G sharp, and G sharp major is pretty much in avoidance. We don't use it very often because every single note is sharped, and F actually requires a double sharp. If you recall from our talk when we introduced pitch, we see double sharps and double flats somewhat rarely, but they mean raising up a value a whole step. But these are pretty difficult to read accidentals, so we don't really use them. So while we can say that A flat major is in frequent use, G sharp major is not. Scales that are built on the same pitches, but written using different letters and accidentals, for example F sharp and G flat, are called enharmonic scales. These are scales that look different, but they sound the same. So the reason why we would use one over the other sometimes is a matter of preference, and sometimes is a situation like this, where one of them is going to be much easier to read than the alternative, and the end result will sound to us the same. I will not assign you any scales that require double sharps or double flats to make. It's more of an FYI type thing. You could hypothetically pick any given note and write out a scale, but some of them may require double sharps and double flats. I will never require you to write any sort of scale that will need double sharps or double flats, but you may find in the wild music that does have this. So just be aware of that. So we can basically summarize all the major scales in use. Since we now know why some scales aren't in common use, like G sharp, this is basically all the scales that we use that exist. These are all the possible scales that we can get without using double sharps or double flats. Notice it's not a ton of options. It's 15 scales. At the top, we have C major, which as we know is nothing. It's just all the white keys on the keyboard, C to C. On the right side here, each scale gets one more flat than the next. And on the left side here, each one gets one more sharp than the next. From completely natural to completely sharp and to completely flat. Once you go beyond this, you start to get things like G sharp major, where you will need to have some double sharps and double flats, for instance. So this can be thought of as a somewhat comprehensive list of all the major scales that we'll see. So you don't need to memorize this list because we know how to make these all from scratch. But if you wanted to, you could. I mean, performers will practice these scales so much that they become just second nature and they're very intuitive. So you don't need to memorize these, but this is basically everything. And then there's a couple that are specifically missing. So notice that there's no G sharp major, there's no D sharp major, and there's no A sharp major. All of these will be used, their enharmonic equivalents over here. B flat for A sharp, A flat for G sharp, and finally E flat for D sharp, for instance. So what is a key signature? This is kind of the main topic of today. We know what a scale is, but besides making them constantly from scratch, is there another way to look at scales? And the answer is absolutely yes. So key signatures are a way to visually represent the accidentals we need to form a scale. We use the term scale and key somewhat interchangeably to describe the collection of notes in a piece. So the scale is the kind of linear progression of pitches, and the key is how we can take all those accidentals and label them. So these two terms are used somewhat interchangeably. A piece is in the key of A major or uses the A major scale. These mean the same thing. So besides showing us the accidentals in a piece of scale, it also allows us to use less accidentals in every measure as we move all the accidentals in the scale to the key signature. So for instance, if we know that every single C is going to be sharp, we can remove it from the actual music and just put it off to the side to make it easier to read and less cluttered. So here's an anatomy of a key signature. Here's what the key signature looks like and how it works in context. So the key signature is what's right over here. Notice that there's two flats over here after the clef and before the time signature. So this piece is in B flat major. We'll figure out how I'll tell you how I knew that in a little bit here. But notice that the B flat major scale has all the B's are flat and all the E's are flat. Well, instead of writing out all these accidentals, we can take them and put them over here, B flat on the B line and E flat on the E space. And that makes our key signature. It transfers the accidentals to the left near the clef. Notice that the lines and spaces where the flats are correspond to their pitches. This is true for sharps as it is for flats. The kind of the fat part of the B, as it were, the flat symbol, is over the B line, for instance. This also means, and this is very important, that we don't need these accidentals if they're in the music. So for instance, we start off on D, go up to F, down to F. This is a B flat. We know that because it's in the key signature. If the composer wants us to play it natural or some other modification, we would then need accidentals to undo the key signature. So the performer will see this and go, okay, every time I see an E or a B, they're going to be flat. So let's take a listen to this. It's kind of hard to tell because I don't have a recording of it with the B's being natural, but basically in this piece, whenever the performers are playing B's or playing E's, they're flat. And the same is true when we get to this note right here. So let's take a listen. This is I believe a violin piece with piano. So we know what a key signature is. They're pretty obvious to look at. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. If I have two flats, they become two flats in the key signature. But how do I identify, just by looking at it, what a key signature is? Memorizing the number of sharps or flats in all the major keys can be cumbersome. Again, you can do it. There's only 15, but that requires a lot of memorization. We can look at the key signature and figure out what the first pitch of a scale is. Now, here's a really important term that we'll use for the rest of the class. So really make sure to kind of asterisk, underline, star this in your notes. The note that a scale is named for, which is the same as scale degree 1, is called the tonic. Tonic is just a fancy way of assigning that particular note extra importance. It's the tonic pitch. It's the note that the scale is named for, scale degree 1. These all mean the same things. Unfortunately, we do need different processes to figure out a key signature for sharps versus flats. So in order to do either of these, in order to identify a flat key signature or a sharp key signature, we need to know a particular order of flats or sharps. So to determine what the tonic of a key signature is, we need to know how these accidentals are configured. And I'll get to why in a little bit. So accidentals have a fixed presentation. What does this mean? We use the order of sharps and flats to know this because in a piece, our scales, how they happen to work is that as you continually get more and more flats or more sharps in a scale, you keep all the flats or the sharps from the previous scale, and as you add new ones, they keep all the old ones. So for instance, you could find a scale that has B flat and a scale that has B flat and E flat. We will never see a key signature with certain floating accidentals. And the reason for that is because of how they proceed in the order of flats or the order of sharps. So the order of flats is this: B, E, A, D, G, C, F. These are all flats. So B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, C flat, and F flat. So a mnemonic that you could use that some people like and previous students have come up with is this. If you need to remember the order, it's better eat a darn good chicken fajita. If you need something to memorize this order for. You could also go B to G, C, F. There's other mnemonics you could find. There's many options out there. What this means is if we have a key signature with flats in it, if it has 3 flats, it has to be these 3 flats: B flat, E flat, and A flat. So music is relatively systematic. There's only 15 options of scales that we have. So there's not an infinite possibility with the juxtaposition of flats here, at least as far as key signatures are concerned. Now, conveniently for us, if you memorize the order of flats, you know the order of sharps, because the order of sharps is the order of flats backwards. So if you know B, E, A, D, G, C, F is flats, sharps is F, C, G, D, A, E, and B, working your way backwards. So let's start off by learning the process for identifying major key signatures first, and then we'll go ahead and take a step back and then do sharp key signatures. So this is the most complicated or the most intricate flat key signature in that it has all 7 flats that could be possible. We have 7 unique notes in a scale, so in this case it would be like every single note has a flat on it. Basically, because of this ordering, all key signatures can be thought of as increasing in the number of flats from left to right, like this, following the order of flats. So, once again, to reiterate an example I just said before, if a key signature has 4 flats, those 4 flats must be B, E, A, and D. It's not just a grab bag. Now, a composer could write pieces that all the G's are flat, all the F's are flat, whatever. They could do that, but they'd have to write the accidentals in the measure. Key signatures are standardized. So if we have 4 flats, it must be B, E, A, and D in that order. So here is the process for determining the tonic pitch for a flat key signature. Go to the penultimate, just a word that means second to last, flat in your key signature. So in this case, we have B flat, E flat, and A flat. Now, I know that both because I see 3 flats, and they're the first 3 flats in the order of flats, but also it's the B flat line, it's the E flat space, it's the A flat space. So you can also just read that and see. The penultimate, the second to last in the order of flats. Now, they are written in the order of flats, B, E, A. Second to last here would be the middle one, E. This is your tonic pitch. The second to last flat in the order of flats here is E flat. Therefore, this is the key signature for E flat major. Now, how does that work? If we start on E flat and E flat, plugging that in with our accidentals gives us whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. You can refer back to the first slide of this presentation for that if you want to revisit. So in order to do this effectively, you must know your order of flats. So again, knowing that mnemonic and being able to recall this quickly is very, very important. But it's pretty straightforward. You just count the number of flats, go to the second to last one. That's your tonic pitch. Plug in those accidentals, and you get a major scale. So sharp keys are a little bit trickier, but they function in the same way as flat keys. So sharps proceed from left to right, and the number of sharps corresponds to their order. So again, we can see the order of flats here backwards. F, C, G, D, A, E, and B. And just like with flats, if a key signature has 4 sharps, those 4 sharps must be F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp. That's a rule. So the process for identifying the tonic pitch for sharp keys is different. So let's look at that. Now, keeping these straight is going to be really important. So make sure that you really remember that there are 2 different processes and which one is which. So for sharp keys, go to the last sharp in your key signature. In this case, we have F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp, F line, C space, G space, F, C, G. The last sharp is G sharp. Take that note, G sharp, and go up a half step, because this is scale degree 7. G sharp is scale degree 7. Up a half step to the next letter name gives you your tonic pitch. So since the last sharp here is G sharp, if you go up a half step, you get the letter A. That's your tonic pitch. So if you plug in A to A and then add those 3 sharps, you get A major, for instance. Again, different processes. They function the same way, but you need a different process in order to get sharp keys versus flat keys. So, for instance, here is all that on one slide. Here's the order of flats. Here's the order of sharps. Remember the mnemonic, better eat a darn good chicken fajita, and then backwards. This is what an entirely flat key signature looks like and an entirely sharp key signature. They're only going to be less complicated than this. And here's the 2 processes. For flat keys, to identify, go to the penultimate flat. That's your tonic. For sharp keys, the last sharp up a half step gives you your tonic. So let's do some practice. How this is going to work is, again, I will basically give you a quick second to pause if you want to. We'll go one by one for all of these, and I'll talk through these as we go. So if you want some practice, I really recommend pausing and taking some time to try things out, refer back to previous slides, and then we can kind of revisit and regroup together. So first one, this is not a mistake. There's nothing here. If you remember, there's one scale that has no accidentals in it. So if you haven't already figured this out, take a second, pause the video. Because this scale, this key signature, is nothing. This is just C major. C major is the neutral scale, so its key signature is blank. If you ever find a key signature that is completely absent, basically, that implies it might be C major. C to C, no accidentals needed. So try this next one out. It's a sharp key, so remember the process. Go ahead and pause your video now if you want to take some time. So let's look at this one. We have F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, and A sharp. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sharps. The last sharp is A sharp. So if we think of our keyboard, we go up a half step from A sharp, and that gives us the note B. So this is B major. If we plug in B to B with these accidentals, we get whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So that's how that one works. Now, flat keys. Try the other process. Okay, remember that it's a different process here. So we have 5 flats here. Pause the video now and try this one out. So we have B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and G flat. The penultimate flat, the second from the end flat, is D flat. Conveniently, that's all we have to do. That's our tonic. D flat major. D flat to D flat. We plug in all of our accidentals. We get whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Now notice that none of these have any accidentals during at all written throughout. That's because they're all over in the key signature. We don't need them. They're already over here, for instance. So that's your flat key. Try another sharp key. 2 sharps, F sharp and C sharp. Go ahead and pause the video now. So this one is D major. If we take C sharp, the last sharp in this key signature, and we go up a half step, that gives us D, the note D rather. That's our tonic. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. So there you go. That's your tonic there. That is your major scale for D. Now, last example. Try this one out. Go ahead and pause the video. This is a trick question. So pause now. Because what do you do with one flat? You might wonder, well, what's the second from the end flat? Like if there's only one. I can't go second from the end if there's only one, right? This is the one exception to either of our rules. It's only one flat and our process won't work. So besides C major, which doesn't really count, the only exception to any of our rules for identifying flat keys or for identifying sharp keys is F major. So you just have to commit to memory that one flat is F major. It's the only one like that. So the good news is that there's only one exception, not too hard to remember. And I'll remind you a lot over the next few lectures especially. So F major has just one flat in it. It's the only one that you should just commit to memory right away. So there's some practice. Again, I've mentioned musictheory.net as a resource before. You could use that site because at the top there's exercises and they have key signature identification practice. So if you want just a bunch of repetition of this to get really quick at it, you can definitely check that website out. It'd be very, very useful. Oh, sorry. So that's basically the kind of first step in our understanding of key signatures here. So what we're going to do next time is continue our practice of identifying. We'll do some more practice with that. We're also going to reverse the process to write key signatures, both in treble clef and in bass clef. There's a couple kind of quirks to writing key signatures, but that's super useful because you can basically off the top of your head think about what the key signature is for a scale and immediately get the scale ready to go and write it down off the top of your head instead of going whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half and doing it very, very slowly and step by step. Still a good way to do it, but we can get this process faster and faster through key signatures. After that, we're going to look at minor scales and keys. So this is going to take place on Monday. So minor scales and keys. We're going to basically do everything that we've done today and do it again with a new system. All this week's material, so building the scales, key signatures, things like that, but with a different fundamental scale, a different sound to the music here. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email your TA or email me. Again, there's resources to practice. You should be able to get a good start on your homework here, and let me know if you have any questions. So thank you all so much, everybody, and I'll see you for the next lecture.